talk about it next week or the week.
Unless we want to make jokes about John McCain. Anyway.
Hello and welcome to Around the Lens, episode 139. I am your host, David J. Murphy. I am so happy to have a great group of panelists on this week. But before I introduce them, let me let you know that Around the Lens is a live, weekly visual journalism roundtable show coming at you every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. We like to talk about all the news, topics, and gear related to the world of visual journalism here on the show, including things like the Nikon N6 and N7, which we'll get to in a minute. But before we talk about that fun stuff, let me introduce my co-hosts. First off is Ron Hamilton. Ron, tell the little audience about yourself.
Aloha from Hawaii, where I'm eager to buy the new Nikon. Or am I? Stay tuned.
It's a great tease there, Ron. It's a great tease. And, of course, Zach Roberts.
This is Zach Roberts, and I am eager to sell all my Nikon equipment and buy a tiny sensor Micro Four Thirds camera, because Dave convinced me.
Welcome. Come to the world of Micro Four Thirds, Zach. We'll be waiting for you with our GH5 and whatever else comes out. Well, so glad to have you guys with us. Let's introduce our guest this week, coming all the way from Canada, Mr. Dave Bottoms. Dave, can you please tell the audience about yourself?
Yeah, sure. How you doing? I'm a street photographer from Toronto, Canada, and basically, I've been documenting the streets of Toronto for the last, I guess, about a decade now, and that's about it. Yeah, I do writing, freelance editing, that sort of stuff on the side as well. So.
Okay, great. Well, I brought you on today because you wrote an article for Petapixel. Just like I wrote an article for Petapixel, if you know what I mean. We'll talk about that later. But you wrote an article for Petapixel all about photographing children on the street in a street photographer kind of way. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you wrote in that article? Kind of why you wrote it, what was sort of your point with it, what you wrote about, and then sort of just the overall sort of reaction you've gotten from people who read the article, and sort of what your experience was like. Kind of being featured on Petapixel?
Well, basically, how it started is as a debate on the Toronto Street Photography Facebook group page, and I'm one of the administrators there, so I was monitoring this debate, and then it got a little out of hand. A few people actually got, the axe and kicked off, and so I decided to write a short article for the group. And it was very Toronto-centric. So I wrote that, and then I realized I had something there, and I did a little research on it and expanded it out to be more of a global audience. And then I approached Petapixel and sent it to them for a look-see, and they got back to me right away and included some of my photos to go with the article, and that was about it, right?
Okay. Great. And talk about what is the content of the article. I mean, obviously it's about essentially the rights and laws and rules you have within Canada when you're photographing children in public, right? And kind of what you have to, how you sort of negotiate that.
Well, the issue, of course, is, any sort of street photographer should know the laws around what they're doing. And basically, we're allowed, at least in Toronto, anyway, in Quebec it's different, but in most of the rest of Canada, it's free game, right? When you're out in public as a person, whether you're with kids or your family, whatever the case is, you've given up your right to privacy, and you're already being, videotaped and, with security cameras all over the place, and it's basically open game. You can photograph anybody any way you see fit, and you don't have, the person being photographed has no right to come to you and bother you with it. But just because you can do that doesn't make it necessarily right. And that was, basically the debate is some people were saying, like, I think it's totally immoral to photograph somebody's kids, without asking for permission. And it's like, but it is legal. And if you're a street photographer, the most attractive kind of photography, of course, is those candid shots rather than posed shots. The moment you go up to the parent and start talking to them about shooting their kid, the kid's going to have a look on his face that turns the photo into, just basically delete, And so for that reason, you're probably going to photograph these children doing stuff that's funny and interesting and humorous or, just nice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, on the flip side, of course, there's creeps out there with long, telephoto lenses that are going around, And that's a whole other side of it, right? And
Yeah.
so you can't blame the parents at all. And that was kind of the point I made, is that, like, I'm not a parent, but if I was, I would certainly not be thrilled about having somebody photographing my kids, some stranger at a street market, let's say. And and so that was basically the point I was trying to make. And then the other part of it was that if you are approached after you've taken a photo by a parent that's complaining to you about, hey, did you just take a photo of my kid? How do you react to that, right? And I was basically laying out some, loosey-goosey ground rules about how you handle that situation. I happen to know, I've also belonged to a photo walks group, and one of the members on more than one occasion has gotten into a bit of a pissing match with people about they're upset they've been photographed, and he thinks he's got every right in the world. It's like, yeah, but you're ruining it for the rest of us, because now you're going to have people walking away from that situation pissed right off. And guess what? Next Saturday night, when they're at a dinner party, they're going to be telling everybody about the street photographer that, basically gave them a hard time. And, and it just makes everybody more aware of street photographers and a little more apprehensive about us, right? So yeah, it serves nobody good, is what it comes down to. Right?
Yeah. Whenever I've been like doing an assignment, doing pure photojournalism on an assignment or something, like I would go into whatever situation I was in and photograph whatever I saw, and then if I saw a kid doing something cute and photogenic and whatnot, usually I had to go up to the parents or go up to the kid to ask their name, get their age, all that fun stuff. Usually the parents nearby, so they see me interacting, or I talk with the parents. I get their and be like, hey, you okay with me? You okay with this? And I'm like, yeah. They're usually like, yeah, great, yeah, please. Oh, wow, you're gonna be in the paper, yada yada yada. So it was always like that. And then recently, when I was in Seattle, actually, I was with some friends and my family, and we were out at a playground. And I had just gotten the Ronin S, and I was playing with that, shooting video with my GH5. Dun dun dun. Anyways, I was shooting video, and my friend who didn't have kids, was like, man, I don't know if I'd trust this guy with a big old camera in a playground, videotaping with my kids around. I'm like, listen, dude, I'm not the one you have to worry about. You have to worry about the guy, like, across the lane over there with a 200 or 300 millimeter telephoto lens. That's the guy you want to is suspicious, not the guy who's got a giant camera who's following around one kid, in a playground. So it's interesting what the general population or general public think about us as photographers around kids. Ron or Zach, you guys have any thoughts on the issue? Any experiences around children?
I also think nowadays the person you actually need to be more concerned with, even than the guy with the telephoto in the van across the way. Like, I feel like
which is free candy on the
that's
side
like
of it.
a Law and Order. That's like a Law and Order kind of episode waiting to happen. But the average everyday sort of thing is dudes. I'm going to generalize, but most of the time it's dudes with cell phones. Is now they can just be in the park and just taking photos of kids or whatever. They don't need any special close-up photos of kids to whatever. But at least I've been really bored lately, so I've been on a between assignments, so I've been on a Law and Order SVU binge. So this is but I mean, like, I actually, in general, like, I have little sisters. I've worked in daycare before. Originally where I was going to go career-wise. I worked at Discovery Zone. I'm not worried about the guy with the big camera, especially if they're out in the open, because no creep is going to be that obvious usually. At least, especially in the last like decade or so. Now the cameras are really tiny and you can high quality and zoom and everything. But it's, the people with the cell phones acting like weird or something like that. Like that's actually like obviously I'm a photographer and I've been a photographer since I was like 10 years old. So I'm able to notice, like, if I see some guy with a Leica at a park, I'm not really worried about that person usually. And we're like generalize. But
what I'm worried about are the 10-year-olds with cameras in the parks photographing the kid. That's what I'm worried about.
Well, if a 10-year-old has a Leica, then I'd be like, someone's daddy's really rich.
Yeah.
Someone's parents are really wealthy.
And if they have a Nikon, I question their sanity. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't remember what I had when I was 9 years old. But it was a power zoom something or another. But at protests and things like that, for the most part, I actually do, if I do photograph like kids at a protest, I usually try to get the candid photo first with my telephoto. I usually shoot if I'm covering like a street protest where it's just in the street, it's not like running around. I carry my 7200, and then I have usually my 35 1.4 on either camera, and so I'll take a couple shots and trying to get candids, and then go up to them and then get the pose shot with them that I usually try to offer. I go, if the kid's cute or has like a really good sign, or whatever the situation, if the situation's merits, and be like, hey, by the way, zdroberts.com, you can go there, and if you want a photo, you can have it, just so that not only they go and look at my work, and so that they know, oh, this isn't some random dude that's creepy taking photos of my kids, but also I've had some level of interaction with them. And so hopefully also in general in future, like you were saying, I think it's really any photographer who's out in public especially with pro gear of any level, whether it be the small Leica or whether it be, like 7200, big noticeable cameras, you are an ambassador. And like, I try really, really hard if I'm photographing, especially children, but, there's like at risk, like the vulnerable communities is usually what it's called. It's just like, whether it be a protest where, trans people are protesting or, I've been, it's a whole different conversation, but, anti-fascists and things like that. It's just try not to be a complete dick, so that the next time there's an interaction with a photographer, that person doesn't get their lens grabbed or, the camera in their face, or just so people are able to take photos in the future. Also, so you're able to take photos in the future, because especially if you're in a community like you're in Toronto, they'll know, people walk down the same street every single day, usually a commuter or whatever. They'll notice you, they know you. And the best case scenario is that they give you the head nod and they know what you're doing and everything's cool. The worst case scenario is they point you out, and make a scene about, oh, look, there's a dude with a camera taking photos of, especially somebody screaming across the street saying there's a dude across the street taking photos of children. You'd be lucky if you make it out of that, make it within a block radius out, I mean, thank God most people, I don't know. I think you should digital, right? Like, thank God you can usually scroll through your photos now. Film, would be, like, well, wait 24 hours to find out whether you were a creep or not. But yeah, that's basically a thought. I completely agree. Like, just don't be a dick. Like, if the parents like freak out about it, move on. No photo's worth not only the scene, but also ruining what other people think of photographers.
Well, also, I think if you're in that, that's your stuff that you shoot, then you should have business cards and be very happy to pass them out to. I always, and it's rare for me to have parents come up to me and say, "Hey, what was that all about?" I immediately show them the photo. I say, I can email it to you. I have a card, or I can delete it right now in front of you. It's totally up to you. No photo.
And then restore it later. Am I right?
I have 2 cards, so we're good.
What? You have a camera with 2 memory card slots? Oh my goodness! What a revolutionary idea!
It's clearly not a new Nikon mirrorless. Right?
I know, right?
I can't recommend having photos on your cards as well. This has saved me a lot. Yeah. I mean, it's just especially. Whether it be the Moo cards, that you can get a bunch of different photos. Yeah, exactly. Or you can get cheaper cards done. But have the fact that you have photos on the card and be like, oh, you really are a photographer. It's not just like a generic business card.
I scrawl my name on a pack of sticky notes, yellow sticky notes, and that's my business card.
Yeah.
Handwritten.
I shoot with a poor man's like a Fuji X Pro 2, and I shoot with primarily either the 18 mil, which is a 28 or 27 mil equivalent on a full frame prime, or a 23 mil, which is 35 on a prime. And the reason I'm bringing that up is what it means is that for me to get the kind of shots that are going to be, wow shots, so to speak, is I need to be right there. Like, I've got to be like 4 or 5 feet away from you, right? So I'm not trying to hide in the bushes across the street. Like, you're going to be the size of my baby fingernail, right? So basically, when people see how I shoot, and I also shoot like with absolute, and I guess as photojournalists, you guys probably do the same, is you go in there and you own it. Like, there's no like you show full confidence, like, I'm supposed to be here, I'm supposed to be doing this 100%, right? Especially things like protests or rallies or any of that stuff. I go in there and I just like own it. And I we had a bunch of Syrian protests in Toronto, and it got to the point where they got to know me. So I'd show up and they'd be coming right over, bringing me in, right, to take photos, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, it's all how you present yourself before and when you're doing it. And then if you run into any kind of issues, how you handle that as well, right? Just totally be professional, own it and take responsibility for your actions kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Ron, any thoughts from you?
Sure. I've shot kids many times working for the paper. Not like that. Although, I think I've told the story on the air before. I went into a high school one time, and I went to the office, I put my camera there on the table, I said, "Hi, I'm here to shoot some kids." And they laughed and said, "Oh, well, we got some suggestions for you."
Would you mind just waiting right over there? I'm just going to make a phone call. Just
anyway,
right there.
A couple times I was there shooting like a fun fair for little kids, even little kids, and it was some story. I don't know. We're doing a story on the fun fair, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, I was over shooting kids, so I'm really blasting away, and somebody asked me, "Who are you shooting for?" "Oh, I'm shooting for the paper." "Oh, okay, cool." And then I said, well, "If you want, I could send you an email." Again, back then we had Blackberries or whatever was the time frame we're talking about here. So I give me an email, and I'll send you a copy of the pictures before it goes in the paper. In case your pictures of which one's your kid? Oh, in case it doesn't go in the paper, at least it'll be there. And then you look in this Wednesday's paper, it'll be blah, 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 like that. The only trouble I ever had that was it was a little bit bad was a high school. I was shooting a high school, some kind of some event they were having at the high school. And I walked in and I said, and the person ran up to me, this lady, she says, "Hi, who are you? Where are you from?" I said, "Well, I'm from the paper. I'm Ron Hamilton." She said, "Okay, great. Come here. Let me give you a tour." I'm like, "Okay, great. Thanks." I didn't know I was going to meet anybody here. So I'm going around and taking my shots. "Oh, this is so-and-so. Get a shot." "Okay, get a shot." Doing all that. And then later in the day, she says, "Ron, who you work for again?" And I told her, and she says, "Well, because there's another guy here. He says he works for the same organization."
Dun, dun, dun.
And I said, "Oh, is it John Smith?" "No, it's not John Smith." "Oh, but he's the only other male photographer that would be here." "Oh, wait, I know. It must be, John Doe." "No, it's not John Doe either." "Oh, but he does the other side of the island. I don't know." "Who is it?" "Well, I don't remember his name, but he said he didn't know who you were." I said, what paper did he work for again?" She said, "Same as mine." I said, "Well, I don't know. Is he around? Let me talk to the guy." "No, he left already. He took one shot and left."
Oh my God.
And I said, "Well,
He's that good.
I showed her my email. "Look, here's my email. This is me, Ron Hamilton. Ron, please go shoot the high school." Showed her the email, and she says, "Well, I don't know who that is." Then then I'm okay. So I still got to get my job done.
Yeah.
I've got to get I got to get 20 shots is what I had to get in for something like 20. Somewhere where they get my shots, and I'm meeting kids and saying hello and getting shots. And then she comes up to me with another lady and says, "Hey, this lady used to work at the paper. She doesn't know you either." And I said, "Well, do you know so-and-so?" "Oh, yeah, I know him." "Oh, do you know so-and-so?" "Yeah, I know him." "Okay, I work for those guys." Well, anybody could have that. Anybody could know that. I said, "Look, now if I leave now, I look like I was a bad guy. So I figured I got to stick it out. And, hey, I belong here. I'm going to own it. I finished my assignment. And then when I left, I had the girl's email or her phone number, the one that first met me and said, hey, meet everybody, and then later told me, get out, you perv, whatever. And I called her when I left. I thank you very much for the hospitality. I got all my shots I need. I was looking for you before I left. I can't find you. If you have any questions, please call me on my private number, blah, blah, blah. And I left, and it, like I said, of course, the photos were published. I was legitimately there. And I never heard from them again. But that experience always made me nervous when I went back to shoot around kids, It made me nervous.
Yeah, no, definitely.
My story.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. That's an interesting story. Ron.
That's one of the problems now is that most newspapers and publications don't issue press credentials to you, especially as freelancers. I actually know some staffers that don't have press credentials now.
Wow.
There's like permalancers, like CS, when he was basically a permalancer for the Village Voice, he got a ancient looking, like it looked like from the 60s, like handmade, like looked like it was actually done with a typewriter press credential, and he's the only person who works for the Village Voice that I know of, at least, that had one. And it was such a delicate scenario that like it kept in his wallet, and that was it. But I never got one. I'd cover things in the city all the time for the Voice, and it would just be like, I'm here with the Village Voice, and I had NPPA credentials or something else beforehand, and so it's more problematic now that you have to try to convince. I work for a wire service, or I work for a small nonprofit news org, and I'll have to make my own press credentials if I ever want them, which that used to be at least the one way. You'd be like, here you go, like look at I can get away with just let me go and let me do my job. But now nobody has anything. If you cover
now that I'm with the TV station, I do have business cards and a name badge and all that stuff, and I can go out there. We're covering the hurricane out here on the Alawai Canal because it's a major waterway. We thought it might get flooded. We're getting shots. We're getting video. And this jogger came up, and she told me, "Oh, don't photograph me. I'm going to be jogging in this area. I don't want to be on your film or whatever you're doing over here." I said, "Okay, just make sure you don't run in front of the camera. You'll be fine."
I'm going to wear a fedora with a little index card that says press on it the next time I go to an event, and a shirt that says not a creep, so that people have no worries whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I'll park my light windowless van right next to the... anyways. I'm sorry, go on, Dave.
It's kind of ironic in this day and age with, mass shootings in schools and all this, and people, we had some random guy walking down in Greektown in Toronto a few weeks back, and he shot 10 people, just out of the blue. And with all that going on, and then to back off on press credentials, you'd think everybody would be stiffening up on all this stuff and making sure you don't get in anywhere without the proper authorized credentials kind of thing. And it just seems to be counterintuitive,
Yeah, for sure. Dave, what did you think of the 130 or so comments that were on your story? Did you read them?
I did. Not all of them. I read most of them. And, for me, I'm looking for a good, if everybody was agreeing with me, I would call that not really a very successful article, right? So the fact that I had half of them, agreeing, and the other half tearing straight, I just let them basically go to war with each other. The only article the only comment that stood out to me was a guy from Paris who actually corrected my paragraph where I talked about the laws in France around street photography, which are pretty prohibitive compared to Canada. And I had a hard time researching that before I wrote that paragraph, and I kind of tried to keep it a little ambiguous so I didn't lock down to something. And he corrected me, and he said basically it's actually not quite like that. It's like this. And I'm like, and I thought if I was going to reply to anybody on that, it would have been to him, right? But I just... my sort of rule on it is I don't want to dig in and get into a big, I let them have it out, right? And the fact that there were 130 comments was great, as far as I was concerned. The more the better, right? Because that means it stirred up some debate, and that's what I wanted to do, right? So
there you go. No, absolutely. Debate is good. And if a sign of success is the amount of people who disagree with you in the comment section of a Petapixel article, then my article was extremely successful. So go me.
I mean, with that said, you could literally say that puppies and cats are pleasant to be around, and there'd be 1,500 comments all disagreeing with you and fighting over it on Petapixel.
Well, indeed. That whole thing explains Donald Trump on Twitter, right? The more people, I must be really liked if everybody's disagreeing with me.
The only place that's worse than Petapixel comment threads are the YouTube threads. That's the only place I've ever. It's where you could just have a picture of a cat and somehow Hitler is invoked. It's within 5 comments, you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
All right, so since we're talking about comments, we're talking about my article, let's go ahead and just move on to our Nikon debate / discussion / brawl / deathmatch here. Of course, I wrote an article about my thoughts, my personal feelings and opinions about the Nikon Z6 and Z7 cameras without ever touching them, which seems to be a huge hang-up for people, that I gave an opinion on something without having actually touched the camera itself, even though had I touched the camera, it would not have had any bearing on my thoughts about the specific 4 things that I talked about in my in my discussion. And I'm going to go over those really quick, and then I'm going to throw it to all of you for your thoughts on the camera itself, and just, again, we can debate my points and stuff. You can tell me how wrong I am, but basically, if you haven't read the article, and I want to say hello to all the people from Petapixel who are watching right now. I appreciate your patronage, and I hope you stick around and become longtime listeners of the Around the Lens show. But truly appreciate anyone who's interested in visual journalism. But I brought up 4 basic points, 4 issues that I had with the camera. Not necessarily what is technically possible, just things that, I would have liked to have seen. So, 4K 60, right? That's the most controversial one because it's like, everybody says it's impossible to 4K 60 in the camera this size, with the processors aren't there and yada, yada, yada. I'm like, maybe that's true. Maybe that's the case is, but, it doesn't preclude me from being disappointed that Nikon couldn't have figured out a way with, again, a brand new system that they're creating from the ground up. There's no preconceived idea of what this camera would look like or the size of the camera. They could have done anything with it. They're coming out with new X-Speed chips, with this. Maybe they could have been capable of 4K, maybe at 60. Maybe they could have figured out a way to do heat dissipation. I mean, obviously, yes, their sensor is larger than the GH5, but the GH5, still figured out a way to get 4K 60 in their body, using different techniques. Again, I think maybe I gave too much credit to Nikon engineers in terms of what they could do with the physical limitations of processors. But all that being said, I'm sure there could have been a way they could have figured out how to do a crop sensor 4K 60. So that being said, that was my first gripe. Again, I've gotten used to 4K 60 with the GH5, so it would have been nice to have it in a full frame sensor in some form or shape. Because what I'm looking for is I'd love to be able to switch from the GH5 to a full frame sensor mirrorless camera, just because I love the larger sensor and what you can do with it, and the light gathering capability and the bokeh and all the fun stuff that comes with, a full frame sensor. But I also want all the other capabilities I have with the GH5. So maybe it's a bit too much to ask, at least on the sensor front. All the other issues I had, I think could have been solved or addressed by Nikon if they had wanted to, at the outset. So again, the flippy screen versus the tilty screen, right? That's a lot of people, some preference, some people care about it, some people don't. I care about it. It's just my personal preference. It's how I use the camera. Again, I would love to have the one camera that does everything. I don't want to have my GH5 for this, and my Nikon for that, and my Sony for that, and my Panasonic, my whatever, my Fuji for that. I want to have the one camera that does it all. So the closer I can get to that perfect camera, the better. So I use my front-facing, monitor for a lot of what I shoot. So do a lot of other YouTubers and bloggers and vloggers and stuff. So it's not like I'm the only one who wants this. So again, it's what I would have liked. And even with the tilty sort of screen, it would have been nice if they had been able to tilt the screen all the way down, flat. They can't. They can only go like this. And I've seen other people who have reviewed cameras with tilty sort of monitors, and they appreciate being able to tilt all the way down. So that was my second point. I thought, again, it would have been nice to be able to see the camera screen from the front without having to attach an external monitor. My third issue with the camera body, and this again, it's personal preference. I prefer the SD card as a platform. I love being able to take the SD card out of my, camera, stick it into my computer, and just start working. I'm sure the XQD card is a perfectly fine platform. I'm sure it's very good shutter, very good transfer speed. But I'll tell you, the Sony cameras, especially the A7R III, it takes SD cards. It shoots about 42 megapixel, very similar to the N7, and it handles transfer of the imagery just fine. It can handle thanks to the buffer inside the camera and whatnot. So the SD card there is not the limiting factor. While I'm sure XQD cards are better, being sort of forced into one card format or another, I don't appreciate. I mean, even Nikon gave you the option to choose the format you wanted when you bought the D5S or D6 or whatever was the one that had the two cards. You could choose XQD or you could choose SD. Maybe a little bit of choice there, or maybe being somehow able to change out what kind of card it takes. You just take a little adapter and stick it in there. I don't know. Again, I prefer SD cards. That's just me. And then finally, lens selection. I mean, again, I love the fact that they're innovating with their new mount. 55 millimeter mount size, great. Let's see what you can do with that. But give me the lens variety to show what you can do with that. I mean, justify your changing the entire lens mount and having to adopt and create a whole new lens system by showing me versatility with lenses. Show me at least, give me a wide angle, give me a zoom, telephoto, give me a medium, so that I can see, oh my gosh, wow, look at what this new mount can do with all this different range of glass. Instead, I'm having to use an adapter, which is perfectly fine. I mean, it can adapt like 90 plus lenses without any issue. And I'm not saying it's an issue. I'm glad that it exists. I wish they included it free in the box with the camera. But, again, I'm going into a new camera system. I want, lenses specifically made for that camera system. They came out with 3 lenses initially. It doesn't show a lot of variety, personally. Again, they could have had 3 lenses that were more varied. And again, I don't think that is a showstopper if you want to adapt your lenses. I think the audience for this camera are people who already own Nikon equipment. I don't think this camera is going to necessarily be the, convince you to go to Nikon or Sony, or it does make the decision a lot harder, I think, if you're kind of, not familiar with Nikon or Sony equipment and you're on the fence about what to go with. But I think it was primarily designed for the Nikon shooter who wants to go mirrorless, but doesn't want to switch to Sony. So in that case, go crazy with your adapter and your lenses and stuff. But, if you're me, I'll wait till there's a nice, family, a suite of lenses for the Z mount that I can use to do whatever I want to do with it, which is, again, build the triad so I can do general photojournalism work. And if that means I have to wait until 2020, so be it. That's fine. That's their decision. I will wait until 2020. And I'll wait till also they come out with a Mark II version of the body or a Mark III version of the body that has maybe the features I want in it. I don't know. I mean, again, a lot of people say you can't do the 4K 60 full frame right now with the processor. Okay, so be it. I'll wait 2 to 3 years and maybe they'll get to it by then. I'm sure they will. I'm sure Sony will get to that. I'm sure Panasonic will get to 4K 120 in like their next iteration of their camera. So anyways, that's my review in a nutshell. Let me throw it to all of you all. I guess I'll throw it to you first, David. What are your thoughts on the N6 and N7, and why do you disagree with all my points?
Well, it was, I had a unique experience reading your article because I didn't realize it was your article till I got to the very end and saw who wrote it, right? So I got
who's
to
this
see it
schmuck, huh?
Exactly. No. But if I had saw your name first, of course, I would have, I had a different lens, read it through a different lens, so to speak, right? But basically, as I was reading it, I was thinking to myself, it really sounds like this guy wants a video camera, not a camera, right? Like not a photographer's camera, right? A still camera. And I thought, why aren't you just going out and there's a whole cornucopia of video cameras, so like semi-professional and pro stuff. Obviously you don't want to spend like $30,000 on a video camera, I'm sure, but there's a lot of stuff that's out there that's really, really good. That's going to check off all those boxes for you. And so that was kind of the one thing. And then the other thing was that if you look at it from the perspective of somebody that just shoots stills, which is basically me, I don't do video work at all. So I'm looking at the camera through that, and it doesn't suit my needs either. I should mention, I wouldn't buy one myself, right? But nonetheless, I know, yeah. But it was actually because I researched this a little bit over the weekend, and I watched numerous videos on YouTube from various people talking about it, and I was a little bit, I have to say, surprised at the amount of negativity. And the amount of people were really like, well, why aren't they knocking this out of the park already? It's like, well, like who? Like who? Name one single manufacturer who's ever on their first attempt with brand new technology knocked it out of the park? Nobody, right? I could name every single one of them, and they all started with virtually crap, and it wasn't until like 3 generations later where it was finally worth like really being interested in and possibly purchasing, right? So for me, it's not too much, and it's kind of like, well, yeah, but they have the Sony to look at already. They have other things, the GH5 to look at, and they can see what's already out there. But I suspect that they're also looking at the cost of R&D and trying to recoup that, and then ramping up production for 10 different lenses right out of the gate. I can't even imagine that being anything but like a huge nightmare and a giant costs, right? Yeah. So they're probably saying like trying to find a nice balance, like what can I put on the market that's going to suit the needs of most of the people and give them a lens selection that's enough to keep them happy for the first year at least. And then down the road, we'll come out with a better body. We'll up our lens selections, and we'll just grow into it. And we'll learn from all these negative comments they're getting right now. I'm sure there's people at Nikon that's looking at them all too, and they're going, okay, guess that's going to go in version 2, right? This sort of thing. And that's sort of my thought on it anyway, right? It was a well-written article.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, going to that point, that you talked about, like, is it a camera or a camera or a video camera or a photo camera? I don't see that distinction in 2018. I don't think any camera manufacturer in this day and age can consider themselves a, sole photo camera manufacturer. I think you have to be well versed in both photo and video. The people who are buying your equipment don't want just a still photo camera. There isn't a newsroom in America, in the world, in this day and age, that wants a just purely still photo camera. I think maybe maybe National Geographic, sure, but I think the majority want that versatility. Even if they don't use it, they still want that versatility because, like, let's take the military, for instance, right? The military is actually moving away from standard sort of ENG news cameras and going towards a completely DSLR-based future, where, again, I give my GH5 to my videographer, my GH5 to my photographer, or whatever camera it is. I'm just using that as an example. And they go out and shoot their photos and they shoot the videos, and then, hey, the next day they swap and they do the other thing. So I would say, again, Nikon is creating this camera just as much for a videographer as they are for a photographer. And to say that Nikon is not like a video company or not in the world of video, I think is a disservice to Nikon, because Nikon has really been leading the way and innovating in a lot of different video categories. Everybody should know that Nikon was the first DSLR to implement video in their DSLRs. They were there before Canon, before anybody else. They had 720p HD video capability in their DSLRs. And I think, they have made a lot of strides in video. And I think even in this camera, they're making a lot of great strides, implementing 4.22, implementing 10-bit video. Those are things that, you don't care about as a photographer, but as a filmmaker, those are things you want.
Yeah.
And I would say this is a perfectly competent video camera for, again, 90% of the people who shoot video. But again, once you've done 4K 60, once you've had that opportunity and that capability, it's really tough to go back, just because of the versatility it gives you with, being able to slow down your video, do more effects in post. It's kind of like shooting 8K for 4K output. It's like nobody watches anything on 8K except for the extremely rich who have, the best TV monitors or whatever. But if you shoot in 8K, you have that versatility to crop in, rotate, do color correction or whatever. And it's kind of like the same way I see with the 60p. So again, me not wanting the camera because of these aspects doesn't make the camera bad. It just makes it bad for me. Let's throw it over to Zach. I know, Zach, you probably got your pre-order already in, right? Right, buddy? Doesn't this check all the boxes that you wanted?
If I had $2,500 sitting around, I would, actually, just because I have a feeling it's the only way I'm going to be able to get my hands on one.
Patreon.com/ZD Roberts.
There you go. Commit to Zach's Z7, Z6 fund.
But I found the camera that you need. It is a Canon came out with it relatively recently. It is the Canon EOS C200 cinema camera. It does really nice stills. And it has the movable LCD screen, has really great audio because it has XLR inputs. It's lens compatible with, lenses that you're able to get, so you can have the whole Canon EOS line. It's $7,500.
I was gonna say, it's only $2,000.
It's the only one that I know of that is kind of like a DSLR that has a real life, usable world sensor size and all the specs that you want. So just so you know, it exists. It's $7,500 and it's about twice the size of a D5. And
so it has a full frame sensor.
It has a Super 35, which I think is, if I remember correctly, it's somewhere between a crop sensor and a 35 millimeter sensor. Even though it says Super 35, it is actually not larger than a 35 millimeter sensor. A friend of mine, I was able to tell that to them after they bought the camera. They were very disappointed.
Oh. I actually did find the perfect camera for me. It has a full frame sensor, just like the one in the Nikon, and it shoots 4K 60. It's called the Sony Venice, and I think it's about $50,000. So that's all I need.
Yeah. So first off, this answers most of your problems. Why Nikon didn't do this? It's like, well, first, never mind. Nikon is, again, let's always remember, Nikon is a smaller company than Sony. Sony is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that includes massive amounts of R&D that would make most pharmaceutical companies probably blush. Mm-hmm. And also same thing with Canon. Canon makes their money in at least a couple of years ago was true. They make their money in printers and they make their other things. So Nikon is a smaller company. The fact that they were able to come out with this, I'm actually surprised. I was expecting to be disappointed. I'm not amazingly happy with what they came out with. I'm not completely overjoyed, especially the price point for the Z7. But I'm not surprised, but it does keep it within the range, I believe, of a lot of people, at least like me, photojournalists who aren't making a crap ton of money and want to try out something new. I mean, it's not completely outside of I'd love the D5. Tomorrow, if somebody handed me a D5, I'd be like, well, then I'm fine. I don't need any of this.
What if they handed you the D5 and said, run, go?
Well, then I'd be suspicious as why they handed it to me and said run. But I mean, so I'm trying to go through remember the points. The lens adapter, the only reason I'll be disappointed or whatever about that is if it ends up being not as quick focus, which I've heard rumors about there being issues, but until I actually have it in my hands, I want to know what the focus is like compared to, say, my D750. Is it bad? Is it bad autofocus compared to the D750? Is it bad autofocus compared to the D850 or the D5? How is it, quote unquote? And I'm just going off of literally people have told. I haven't watched any of the YouTube videos. I specifically stayed away from them because I just didn't want to go in that drain. But the LCD, I don't know. If they're making, the question is, what is Nikon making this camera for? Who are they making? What career path are they making it for? Are they making it for fun consumer cameras where people take photos of their kids, or people, just people who want something better than their point and shoot or their cell phone and want lens selection and play around? Then, yeah, the LCD thing is an issue to an extent. But I don't know, so they have the Z750, my understanding is the Z750 and the Z6 and Z7 have the same LCD as the 750. And you can, you can have full flexibility with it up and down and around. The only thing you can't do is turn it towards you, which honestly, if you want a camera that can take the beatings that these DSLRs can, I would be very, very concerned about it having that one individual arm, which I've used video cameras that have that one arm that hold on the LCD, and I don't have that LCD out when I'm shooting in a crowd scene because it's going to get knocked, it's going to get hit, it's going to get broken, right. And so I completely, from a weather seal and a just I want this camera to last look, I'm completely and totally fine with Nikon not having that flexibility. If I was using it as a video camera, that's something I'd want. I wish that when I'm using my DSLRs as video cameras, I wish that the LCD flipped out so that I didn't have to stand, if I'm interviewing somebody, I don't have to stand right behind the camera to be able to see things. But again, as more and more I've gone back and forth. I've had the JVC 4K camera before, ended up selling it and kind of moving back to my DSLRs. And I don't really I think you need, if you're going to work as a professional to some level in either field, you need both. Every person that I've seen that if you're practically using it fully, you need both. If you're just doing sit down interviews and things like that, you can get a little XLR attachment for this and sync the audio afterwards, and it works. Again, your answer and everyone's answer who wants something that's both, it's a Canon EOS series camera, C100 series camera. And the starting price point, I think, is still $2,300 on the C100. I don't know. I don't remember that doing 4K or not, but it's also a massive rig, which is not something that a photojournalist in general can use practically. I have friends of mine that do use and switch back and forth, but it's a better video camera than it is a still camera, but it still has that autofocusing problem, which if you're doing run and gun stuff, DSLR and even mirrorless autofocus is not up to the par that a proper video camera is. You need a servo in the lens, you need autofocus, and you need zoom that doesn't require you to move the camera and move the lens. Like, I know a lot of shooters that can do it, and they're absolutely amazing, and they get $1,500 a day rates at least, and they're incredible human beings when it comes to camera work. But I mean, all the other specs, I mean, it's at least on par with the Sony, except, and can we also remember that when Sony came out with their mirrorless camera, did they have lenses at all? Like, I remember them having 2 lenses. I do wish that Nikon came out with the kit lens that you kind of buy a camera with, or as a pro. I wish it came out with a 24-70 2.8 and a 70-200. But on the other hand, every single, like you said, every single person buying this Nikon camera, I'm betting, is a Nikon shooter. And also, I mean, the other thing too is that within 6 months, or not even within 6 months, I would bet anytime soon, all the companies that make the autofocus adapters, I forget the name of the company, but there's a couple companies that make really, really good ones that are able to like adapt a Nikon lens onto a Canon camera or a Sony. They're going to come out with their version of this you'll be able to put a Sony lens on this, or you'll be able to put a Canon lens on this, and that'll just be individually on how well it works and whether it's up to the par of thing. I don't think the lens selection is that big of a deal, especially this soon. Obviously, in a year or so, if they haven't come out with like a wider range of the kind of the necessary lenses you have, that'll be a problem. I mean, Sony took a long time to come out with their kit lenses. I remember them not having a 70-200 for quite a while. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to remember what your other points were, but I mean, I'm excited for this. I'm not as excited as I hope to be about it. I think there's a couple things maybe that Nikon could have done better. I mean, the big thing for me was that at least to hit the price point. And by the way, it does. If you go on B&H's website right now, I'm looking for it. Sony, Nikon Z6 mirrorless digital with FTZ mount adapter. It's $2,146. So I don't know if that's the complete kit, how it's always going to be, but that's the price point that they said it was going to be. Yeah. So it does come with the adapter.
It comes with an adapter if you pay $150 more. Yes.
I'm trying to find where it says just the camera alone. I mean,
it's on there.
Yeah. I mean, again, these adapters run several $100s usually.
Right.
So, I mean, they're doing what they're doing. I mean, paying $100 more on a camera. I'm still scrolling. Oh, there it is. Oh, no, that's the Sony. I don't think it's available as just the
Maybe it's sold
camera
out or something. I don't know. But yeah, okay. I saw it on there at B&H the other day. I was looking it up. Because I pre-ordered one. No, I didn't. I'm just kidding. Wouldn't that be crazy? Wouldn't that be a turn event? I was just trying to get y'all off to pre-order because I was going to pre-order it myself. It was all my big scheme because I wanted a Z6 to myself.
But I mean, in the end, it's like we seem to forget every single time a camera company comes out with a new big thing. We seem to forget that this is the same exact story that the previous came out with. I mean, you were right. Like this, Sony had the same problem before. Every single camera company comes out with their new kits. People crap on them continually on the internet, and if they end up doing well enough, then you get the next generation of things. I mean, this is always the thing. Is luckily, hopefully, there'll be enough early adopters to this that will encourage Nikon to really do more develop on it. It won't turn out to be Nikon's J1 camera series, which was just a complete and utter disappointment. But like, hopefully we'll get this because we have to have, I think that mirrorless is where everything is going, which is begrudgingly, for me. I like my DSLR cameras. But this is where everything's going. So I think this is a really, really not only a good first hit for Nikon, but also just for any camera company that would have come in, but especially Nikon.
Yeah, actually,
if you put yourself in the sort of around the boardroom of Nikon and think about it, right? Like you can bet they're talking Photokina coming. We have to have this hit the market by Photokina, number one. Number two, we have it's got to be at the same price point, roughly as Sony. So we're competing against that, right?
Yep.
Number three, no matter what we throw out there, Sony's going to top it in 6 months. Their turnaround on cameras nowadays, it seems like they come out with 2 a year. It's crazy, right? So it's like, why are we busting our balls to make everybody happy for a camera that 1 year from now will be old news because Sony will have already done it. So we just need to get into the game
1 year from now. That's generous.
I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
And if they did hit all the things, or if they even hit a couple more of the things, I think that they found a really good middle ground, because every single thing that they add that brings them even better than the Sony camera that's already out, or the whatever exists out there, adds another $100. And when they initially came out with I'm like, okay, so this is me. I'm 2:00 in the morning watching the Nikon live feed, something I never do. I'm a Nikon fan, true and true, but I don't watch they do really, they need to take a page from Apple on their presentations. It was really terrible.
Usually you're just up at 2 a.m. for the heck of it, right?
I'm just up at 2 a.m. Angry tweeting at people. But this time I was tweeting and whatever, posting about Nikon. When they came through and they just put up the I think would have been the yen on a price point on it. And right off the bat, when they announced what the price points were, I did the quick calculations in yen to dollar, and it was like $2,500. And I was crushed, because not only because that comes $500 more than the Sony that's already out and available and has lens adapters for Nikon. It has everything under the sun. But it's that's immediately the point where you're like, oh no, this is going to be another bomb for Nikon. And they ended up coming out with the correct price point. I think the correct price point for what's in the camera currently. The other thing too is that I'm really curious on what with mirrorless. And Dave, you'll know this a little bit better than me, because Panasonic's come out with some actually useful firmware updates, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Same with Fuji as well. Both of them.
Yeah,
Panasonic and Fuji are great for that. Yeah.
That doesn't happen with DSLR, and again, I'm completely, totally ignorant on how. Yeah. Just probably that's technologically just not possible for some reason or another. But there's also the chance that they're going to have updates, and whether it's going to be whether it's going to be your dreamy 4K 60p that
I would take a crop sensor 4K 60p. I would be happy with that.
I'll tell you something. Yeah. If I can just jump in, I bought that X Pro 2. I think October will be 2 years now that I've owned it, right?
Yeah.
It's as if I have an X Pro 2 Mark III right now compared to the camera I bought to now, because of the firmware updates. The autofocus is way faster. The camera I bought didn't even have 4K video. It's got 4K video. I've never taken video with it yet. So it means nothing to me. But somehow they managed to get all this stuff in there, right? Yeah, through firmware updates.
I didn't know that the firmware update would be able to go from 1080p to 4K. That's
probably But probably when they were designing the camera to begin with, they had an objective of 4K, and they went, you know what, we can't get this on the market. Either we can't get it on the market in time, or we can't get it on the market within the price point with this. But we can build it in. We can't get the firmware done. We'll work on that later. So let's at least put in the hardware that the firmware can talk to and make all this work down the road. It's just guessing. I don't know, right?
Yeah, no, that's to me, that's what I'm. Obviously, there's no way to know possibly, but I mean, that's where at least I'm seeing this camera. This is a really good shell. I've heard that the weather protection's amazing. So it's looking at the specs and looking at everything we know about the camera right now. It's a fantastic DSLR. It's a fantastic photojournalist camera. Just with a couple things that aren't even missing, that aren't even in a DSLR, but like we imagine that we're missing because we imagine what this camera has to be, which is again a problem with anything, whether it be a laptop or or a laptop or a car or whatever. But if they're able to do firmware updates, then that's game changing. To say.
Now, would that be new for Nikon? I don't know Nikon well enough to know. I
think it would be new because they only have DSLR. Every update I've ever had for any of my cameras they've changed like menu quickness and things like that, like maybe some buffer quickness or something. I've never seen a major update that I know of, albeit I don't think I've done an update on either of my cameras ever.
So they do firmware updates for DSLRs. I remember getting firmware updates on my Canon 5D Mark II back in the day. I download it, load it on my CF card, plug it into the thing, run the little thing, bada bing, bada boom. I never, it never really made a market difference in terms of my actual usability. Like for instance, all the like you were mentioning, the firmware updates for the GH5 had made market updates or upgrades in terms of its capability. But that's because when it came out, and even still today, the autofocus is complete garbage for the most part. It's better. It's better today than it was when it first came out. I'll give them that. But, if you're talking about like my gripes and complaints about the GH5, the autofocus system is just not there. I would much rather have the Sony's autofocus system, in the GH5. And, my hope is that with the GH6, they maybe fix that. But, who knows? I'm gonna be writing the next article on Petapixel and be like, man, the GH6 sucks because X, Y, or Z. Here are my 4 points. Come at me, Panasonic bros.
At least the GH6 will be truly a video camera. You know what I mean? That takes stills. Where,
yeah, right.
With the Nikon, it's debatable, right?
But that goes to your thing, Zach. Maybe the C200 can do whatever, but I still like the form factor of a DSLR style camera, the small camera body. The Micro Four Thirds size.
There is also the Canon. I'm trying to find
1DX Mark
the
II.
XC10. It shoots 4K. It's in a DSLR form factor. It's a little bit smaller. It has a mount lens. It's just one lens. I forget what the zoom is on it. My experience with it was that it was a terrible camera, top to bottom, like some sort of Frankenstein monster, I think is what I called it.
Yeah.
Like all of the worst parts of both cameras into one device.
Right.
But that's only $1,400. So, so they keep trying. And my experience is work as a person who works as a videographer professionally. Less than a still photographer, but still as a professional videographer occasionally. Mm-hmm. But as a still photographer as well, you need to have two things. Mm-hmm. If your work is again within the world of photojournalism, I know there are people who do both and run and gun and do amazing stuff. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to try to do the things that a proper news camera person or a DSLR person or a like cinematographer in general has, I think it's one or the other. There's also a big problem where, like, I have my D750. I'll shoot video with it a lot. I love Nikon video. I know I'm one of the few people out there, but I prefer Nikon video over almost everything else. But I have an XLR mount that goes on the bottom so I can plug in and record. And then I have my shotgun mount and the thing. It stops the camera from functioning as a still camera. I can't. Especially if I have glasses, I can't hold my camera up to my face while all of that stuff is going on. I have to use the LCD screen to shoot. So it prevents me from doing the work that I prefer to do, which is still photography. And so it just ends up being not only one more thing that I have to carry around and take off and put in my bag and put back on when I want to do interviews, but I'd rather just have a smaller, like the Canon, I think they're the EF lens or the EF camera, 4K cameras that they're coming out with. They're super small 4K video cameras that have a XLR mount, and they're like the size of probably the size of a D5, not even a D5, but with a decent, with like a 24-70 on it, and same amount of weight. You can just slip it in your bag. I'd rather have that in my bag than all the ridiculous things that you need to do to professionally do DSLR video.
No. Ron, have you made your pre-order yet? I'm sure you have, but I just want to check.
Regarding the C200 line, it's wonderful. The C300 is even better.
Yeah.
But the crop factor is actually, it's not as good as it's 1.5. So it's Canon's typical crop is 1.6. So 1.5 puts it the same as Nikon's crop, which is interesting because the other Canon, the 1D, was a 1.3 crop. So you kind of figure the professional line you think would have at least a 1.3, but no, it's 1.5. Regarding firmware upgrades for the Canon, you're right that the incremental firmware upgrades you get from Canon are not spectacular, which is why I use Magic Lantern. Canon has that benefit that you can install Magic Lantern and upgrade your camera phenomenally.
Yeah.
Do all kinds of magic things with your camera.
That terrifies me still.
What's that?
That still terrifies me to do that.
I did it
I
with the 5D Mark II. It was fun.
Dude, so that's normal. But I mean, like, the idea of, like, that's why I used to love Apple. Like, before they
leave
went.
me alone.
I'm like,
we know what we're doing. Don't touch it.
No,
I like to tinker. The other one is Canon. If you're listening, don't make the mistake Nikon did. I want a tilty, flippy screen. If you're going to make me I got to adapt my lenses. I can't use them natively. Okay, give me some good lenses. I want 15 to 30 or 16, whatever the hell you got, 16 to 35. I want 70 to 200. I want 24 to 70. I want f2.8. If you're going to make me buy new lenses, give me something good to use.
These are my demands. If you want the children to be freed, that you have to give me my demands.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I am very curious on when we'll get to the point and like I'd have to know a lot more about the economics of actually putting these things together. But I am curious on when we'll get to the point where these things will be a little bit more modular. Because I mean, when you look at a DSLR, you look at a mirrorless camera.
Like your moto mods?
No, I mean, not even like, upgrading memory and things like that. Like that I wish, but we all know where all tech is going the Apple route where, nope, you buy this laptop and that's it. You can't do anything else with it. You bought it and then you throw it away and then you buy a new one. But things like having different options, like I can see, albeit I personally for my work, I just don't care. I can see where the need for the flippy LCD screen or whatever would be a thing. Is that if you build the camera originally properly, would it be a way you'd be like, well, do you want this one or do you want that one? Do you want the one that has the flip screen of this one's $200, this one's $250. Like we actually have options a little bit more, I guess a little more like a car. And because it'd be very interesting to see where that could move the tech a little bit more, but I don't think it'll ever happen. Like I think Dave was mouthing that it'll never happen, but like same thing with the SD card options and things like that. I've heard that there's going to be an adapter from the was it XD card to the I guess it would be XC card now, but I don't know whether that's true or not. That would be very nice because I've got like $300 in SD cards, and also it would be really nice to be able to have one mirrorless camera and one DSLR and not have to worry about different SD cards for each one or cards for each one. But
yeah, I do want to say that I am currently using a Nikon mirrorless camera where I work, the Nikon 1. So I'm ahead of all of you because you say I haven't used the Z7, Z6. No, I haven't, but I am using Nikon's mirrorless camera system. So there, in your face. And it's, it's okay. It's fine. It's a camera. It doesn't shoot 4K. But then again, I didn't buy it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Expect that in my next article on Petapixel. I do want to say, I've never written an article directly for Petapixel. I did write something for my own blog, which Petapixel picked up as a story and then rebroadcast or whatever. They didn't take it verbatim like they did this. So, first of all, very thankful if anyone from Petapixel is listening, very thankful for you guys, broadcasting my opinion. You didn't have to do that, and I appreciate that. Happy to have my opinion out there and being, broadcast and amplified by Petapixel and its 6 million unique users a month. So, and very interested to see the comments. And, I loved engaging with the comments, even though some of the comments come from the depths of hell. But, again, I mean, you get some really good commenters. You get some people who just want to antagonize and troll, and I get that. And, I had some fun on it, and it was interesting, but I don't think I really want to go voluntarily into the comment section of most Petapixel articles, if I can help it. But it was a good experience, and, again, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about, the camera and my thoughts on it. And I got schooled a bit, obviously people, giving me like things saying like, hey, the processor and this and that, and it's not just like they can flip a switch and it works. Okay, I get that. Yeah, totally understand. I'm here to learn, and I take the good as well as the bad. I take praise as well as critique. When I was growing up as a photographer, I would never have gotten better if everybody said, "Oh, your work is excellent. Keep up the good work." I only got better when people tore me down, so I could be built and get back, get better from that. So I will take my lumps if it is so. But I will not be getting the camera. Surprise. Not that I was a surprise to anyone, but again, I have seen both the light side and the dark side of Petapixel, and it's scary. But I do want to close. We didn't, obviously have run into our hour time limit, but I did want to make sure I did at least give Ron the opportunity to talk about the topic that he brought up, which is, shooting subjects that you don't want to shoot, or, shooting subjects you're forced to shoot. So Ron, you brought this topic to me via email. I put it into the show. We'll end our show with just talking about this briefly. So why did you bring up this topic, and tell us a little bit about it?
All right, we could spend a whole show on this, but I guess we'll spend 30 seconds instead.
Okay, and that was Ron's opinion. Thank you, Ron. All right, well, this has been... Okay, go on.
No, just
it could be its own show, but I want to make sure at least we briefly...
It's all right. We'll touch on it briefly. The idea was I was looking through some old magazine photos, and what was it, Vanity Fair or Time? Anyway, there was a magazine... and they wanted to do a story on Lieutenant Calley from Vietnam, Lieutenant Calley from the My Lai massacre, who killed women and children, and they photographed him for the cover of the magazine with a bunch of Vietnamese kids, holding them in his arms like he was, a father figure or whatever. And they told him, "Oh, we want to make a humanizing article for you." So he agreed to be on the photo, and the photographer who was assigned to do the shot, he says, "I did not want to do this. I think this guy's a monster, but I did it because it was my job." And he had, of course, you don't take one photo. You got to pose him with the kids like this, pose him with the kids like that. So I don't know how many hours they spent with the guy, but I thought if I was the guy, I would have been very revolted at the prospect of it. And I thought we could talk about it, but like I said, that's an hour-long topic. But anyway, that's all I have to say, I guess. I guess you guys can put your 30 cents in now. 30 seconds in.
Well, from my point of view, in that situation, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but basically when that viewfinder comes up to my eye, whatever's happening in front of me, and whoever it is or however revolting or whatever, there's a separation there, right? I'm thinking about the composition. I'm thinking about the light. I'm thinking about where do I need to be, low over here, whatever, right? And the last thing I'm thinking about is how much I don't want to do this, right? I don't have the kind of experience you're talking about, so I can't speak to that specifically. But I don't shoot homeless people, for instance, unless there's a really good reason to do it. Just on the weekend, I was at St. Lawrence Market in Toronto, and I gave this guy, a young guy, he wasn't even 30 years old, and I gave him some change, and he was severely burned, right? So he was a burn victim, his ears were melted off, that kind of severity, right? And as I walked away, he said, "Do you want to take my picture?" I had my camera around my back, and I said, "Hey, thanks, man, but no, I'm good," right? It's like, I don't want to take your picture because I feel like I'd be exploiting you. And even if I took your picture, I wouldn't want to show anybody because I think it speaks far more to me than it does to whatever image I might have captured. You know what I mean? And so I just let it go, right? And that's just my personal take on it, right?
I don't think I've ever been in a situation where I had to photograph something where I vehemently disagreed with. I photographed things that weren't pleasant, injuries on people when you had to take for evidence for crime scenes. I've known people who had to shoot a lot worse doing that type of thing, injuries on kids or murders or death and stuff like that. And I've seen stuff where again you have to shoot after a bomb has gone off, and somebody was a suicide bomber in Iraq. That was pretty intense. But again, I wasn't the person doing it. But in terms of like vehemently disagreeing with, I don't know. Yeah, I kind of take your side on it, Dave. I mean, if you're doing the job, you kind of have to separate yourself from the, your personal feelings about it. You just got to kind of do the work, I mean, I know, Zach, you have very much you're vehemently against certain things on the right side, but you've said it yourself that you take the jump at the chance to photograph something that has to do with the president just because it's history.
Well, I covered the Unite the Right rally, the second one in front of the White House last week, and it was it was different this time because there was the counter protester interaction was not existent so the only people I was photographing were the white supremacists, white nationalists that were there, including one guy who, Jason Kessler, was the organizer of the first Unite the Right and this one, who I had a chance to actually talk to. And while he called everything that I've worked over the last year a lie and called the kid that I photographed, DeAndre Harris, a liar and a racist and all these other things, I still photographed him. I don't know, though, on the other hand, like when you described this Vanity Fair shoot, I don't know how I'd photograph if I had the scenario where you had people directing you on how the shoot was happening. Like I got to control every image that I took of Jason Kessler, even though it was like nicely lit and there was like trees around, it was like dappled light coming through and everything for a while. I still had a problem with publishing some of them because they made him look too good and he's a vile human being. But things like that where it's just like, that scenario, the Vanity Fair scenario, I'd have a hard time not getting fired that day. Because that just sounds like a disgusting shoot. Again, you're just it's just describing it how it is, but
my thought was too that I think I would request that you could find somebody else, please. Could you please get somebody else, please? I'd rather not do this. Can you please? Because I'm a salaried employee, right? I get paid to say whether I shoot this guy or not.
I'll pay somebody else to take these images.
Yeah, I think if one of my if somebody who worked for me said that they were vehemently opposed to shooting something, I would definitely take that into consideration. And I mean, if there's another person who can do it, great. Let's swap them out and let's do it. If you're the only person, I mean, here's the straw. Suck it up. I mean, obviously.
It's also hard to sometimes, like, when you're having a story, especially if you're working with a writer, and you're taking photos of somebody who's is going to be portrayed poorly in the story, which it's only happened a handful of times with me. It's hard taking like nice portraits of them, like that sort of thing. Sometimes it's like where like I feel like I don't ever like to lie to my subject, whether I hate their guts and wish they would jump off a cliff, or whether I really, really like them and trust and think that and hope for them and trust them. I don't like that. I think that's kind of bad journalism to an extent. But yeah, I mean, it's.
All right. Well, I think that's going to end out this week's show. Ron, we'll have to extend this topic for another night. We can continue. I mean, like you said, we could keep on going for this for a while now, but let's close off the show this week. Dave, is there anything you would like to tell us, tell the audience to go check out?
Well, if they like, I have a blog, lazyphotographer.ca, and then I'm on Instagram. Lazyphotographer.ca is my handle on Instagram, and I guess that's about the two things where I primarily post my photos, right?
I'm curious,
Instagram is more curated.
What's the genesis of the Lazy Photographer username?
Oh, basically, I got laid off from a job in May of 2009, and I decided that rather than go and get another job, that I would take the summer off and learn photography. And it seemed like a pretty lazy endeavor, and so I just came up with Lazy Photographer for that reason. Now I tell everybody it's supposed to be ironic because I'm so prolific, right? Because I go out shooting every weekend, and it's like contradictory to who I really am, kind of thing, right? But
I like that. It's like if we called Ron the good photographer, it's contradictory to I'm just messing with you, Ron.
Wow.
Just messing with you. Ron is a great
like
photographer.
If we had a Panasonic blog or a blog about Panasonic cameras and called it a good anyway.
Or if you called me the smart photographer, it's like, of course, that is completely contradictory to what I actually am, because I don't know anything about sensors and what a full-frame sensor can do. I got schooled. I'll be honest. I got schooled. I got schooled by all the people in the comments section. Thank you for letting me know. Should have done my research. But anyways. All right. Well, that's gonna close out this week's show. Ron, you got anything you want to throw out? Other than that
I'd
shirt?
like to throw out the baby with the bathwater, please.
Yeah.
Okay, smart. I like that. By the way, how's the Arsenal doing for you? Still knocking out those great picks?
Okay, okay, quickly. I have an assignment last weekend, the hurricane and all. So I take my Arsenal off the camera. I go out there to shoot, and everything looks like crap. I can't take a picture for nothing.
Really?
So I start The reason is the Arsenal sometimes will mess up your camera, and you have to say clear custom functions. I had to look on the internet to find the answers.
Wow.
Who else had this problem? And then everything worked after that.
Okay.
But it screwed me up, and I used my cell phone for a lot of stuff I should have used my real camera for.
Oh, okay. Nice. Well, I can't wait to get that Arsenal in my hand so I could try it out. We can have that full hour-long discussion about what we thought about the Arsenal. Right, Zach? Are you looking forward to that?
Oh, yeah. Because it'll totally work in my field of work.
Indeed. Absolutely. Zach, you got anything you want to throw out? Anything we should look for? Maybe something from Visu News?
Hopefully, a couple more of the people from the photo of DeAndre Harris that I took from Charlottesville. They got 8 years and 10 years respectively. So I now have a record of my photos sending people to jail. So that's good.
Awesome. Great job. All right. Well, again, this has been Around the Lens, episode 139. If you want to follow us and see what we're doing and listen to all the other previous shows, go to aroundthelens.com. That's where we archive all the episodes, and I post blog posts that, get inflammatory responses on purpose. But anyways, again, I've been David J. Murphy. I want to thank our guest, David Bottoms, for being on the show tonight. Really appreciate your time. And
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. And for Ron Hamilton and Zach Roberts, again, I am David J. Murphy. This has been episode 139 of Around the Lens, and we are out and broadcast.